Thank you. And there's a lot that's actually going to feed really well into what Renee is going to be talking about here shortly. So I'll just do a quick introduction for Renee so that those of you guys who aren't as familiar with her yet are going to know a little bit about her background, but you should have seen some stuff on the Zoom link and everything. But Renee Lopez has 20 years coaching experience. She's a veteran at the high school, Division I, Division II, Division III level. She was on staff of the 2003 University of Florida women's soccer team that went to the Elite Eight. She's helped produce 3 All-American players, which is incredible. And she's a member of the Positive Coaching Alliance with John Gordon, who many of you guys know. And when we did a poll on favorite coaching mentors, a lot of you guys put his name down. So she's involved with him directly as a coach. She's an expert in recruiting and is the author of the book Looking for a Full Ride. And she consults to college, collegiate and high school coaches, families, and athletes, as well as operates as a leadership consultant and coach in the professional world. So Renee, I'm going to unmute you here. Let me just get this all set and give you the host permission so you can make sure to share your screen as you wish. Cool. You should be able to. There you go. You're good.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you all tonight, and I'm really excited to share some information and give a lot of you guys updates of what's been going on in the COVID world and what it looks like, from a college coach's perspective, to kind of help all of you who are trying to help your high school student athletes and try to maneuver through this whole process and figure out, how to get recruited still in this crazy world. So we're going to be covering a lot tonight, and I'm going to definitely give you guys a lot of information. So grab a pen and paper. If you don't have one, you're definitely going to want one. I'm going to throw a lot at you. And if you have questions at the end, feel free to reach out to me. And we will get you guys caught up on everything. Give me just one second. I'm going to share my screen here. And if you guys can let us know also in the chat, if you guys are either on Facebook Live or are on Zoom, let us know what sports you coach and what levels you're coaching, and also where you're from. I'd love to hear from that and get in touch with you guys as well. So this is my contact information. If you guys are interested in ever reaching out, I'll give you a lot of free resources that I also have on my website. I think Eli will put all this into the chat as well on both Facebook Live and with Zoom. And my email is info@lookingforafullride.com. We're going to be talking tonight about the idea of what's the most important essentials going on for recruiting for 2021 class and 2022s. Obviously, the 23s and 24s, they're going to want to be jumping into this process too, but the 21s and 22s are the biggest force of nature that is craziness trying to get this all figured out. So let us know who you are in the audience. I do want to tell you, I do run, like Eli mentioned, I do a lot of information and get it out, recruiting education to families. And I actually run a Facebook group that I encourage all of you guys to join. It's called Educating Parents of High School Athletes on the College Recruiting Process. We have over 10,000 people in that Facebook group. And basically what we do is we teach families what to do in the process, and I have a team of experts that also help in there, some former college coaches, as well as other experts in different realms of the recruiting process. And so we want to give that information out to families and also for you guys as high school and club coaches, travel coaches, whatever you may be. We would love for you guys to join us, and it's completely for free. So definitely join in that. Just going to give you my background. Eli mentioned a little bit. I was a college coach for 14 years, and I was at the head coach at the NAI level as well as D2 and D1. I was assistant at the D3 level, and I am honored to have had all 3 All-Americans. And it's interesting. People always ask me, "Tell me about those All-Americans," and it's funny. The first thing I always tell everyone is they weren't on a full ride, and I just want people to know that and have that perspective. When you go through the process, and that they're just because they're a star athlete, they don't always necessarily get an athletic scholarship for a full tuition waiver or room and board and things like that. And so we'll cover that a little bit tonight. But again, you can feel free to reach out to me. But again, a little bit of my background. We do a lot of work with John Gordon companies as well as with John Maxwell team. I'm certified with the Positive Coaching Alliance. And so I do speak on leadership development as well as recruiting education. So if you ever need any of those resources, feel free to reach out to me as well. But tonight we're going to focus on recruiting. Honored to have had my research that I interviewed 65 college coaches and athletic directors across 19 different sports, across schools that you've heard of, like the University of Florida and the University of Alabama and the University of Virginia and Nebraska, but also a bunch of schools you've never probably heard of unless you're from that local area. So we have D3s, junior colleges, NAIs, small Christian colleges you may have never heard of, again, D2s, D1s. We have interviewed 65 college coaches to put into my book to provide a true insider's perspective. It took me 2.5 years to get all of that research put together, and we're honored to have already been featured on ESPN Radio and SiriusXM, as well as multiple other media outlets. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about a couple different things of what updates our colleges are currently facing, what does it look like, and implications for you as a coach, and implications for you in working with your high school student athletes when they're trying to go through the process, because they're probably showing up to you guys saying, oh my gosh, what should we do? I don't even know. We can't play at this event, and things like that. So we're going to talk about the most updated rules, what's going on, dead periods, quiet periods, and then the best strategies for them to be marketing themselves to college coaches in the midst of all this, and what's your role in that as a high school or a club travel coach. So I want to, I'd love to hear what your struggles are right now in the recruiting process. Let us know in the chat. We're going to try and tackle some of them. We might not be able to tackle all of them tonight, but I'll definitely try and help you guys out. So feel free to throw those in the chat, and either on Facebook Live or also in the Zoom. So I think the question I keep getting from everybody is, what else could possibly get postponed or changed right now? Anyone else? Anybody got to give me a hand for that? It looks like lots of people raising their hands saying yes. It's been so crazy. Well, the thing is, I want you to have that perspective. That's what you guys may be feeling, is saying, well, gosh, I want these events to be happening. But what is it that the college coaches are really dealing with? And give you kind of peeling back the curtain. I've been talking to a lot of college coaches. I was in the industry for 14 years. And still keep in touch with many of my coaching friends who are trying to get ready for seasons, or getting a shift as their seasons are moving to the maybe for spring, things like that. The other part is that their school schedule is also adjusting and changing, and literally there are updates happening every single day, as many of you know, across the board. I can't even keep up with every single conference that changes something every single day. It's happening, and which sports got moved, which ones didn't, and who's trying to still cross their fingers and try and go for this fall. So, the idea also is that these schools are also dealing with international student athletes having a very big difficulty and tons of challenges of them getting back into the country, depending on if their school is online, if they're not online, if they're doing a hybrid kind of thing situation. So that's a huge challenge a lot of college coaches are dealing with right now. And then they're also dealing with the struggle of, are students able to return to the college? If they weren't on a full scholarship, they may have had parents lose a job, things like that. Maybe two parents lose a job. Their financial aid had got shifted and adjusted to things like that. And so also some of them may not have done so great in their grades doing it online in the spring without coaches being next to them all the time and keeping an eye on them, as many of you do with your high school student athletes as well. So now also, especially some implications for spring sports, the idea of our kids returning in terms of their 5th year, and to return even though they have a 4th year to play in that 5th year. And then housing implications, that's become a huge problem. Everybody had roommates and everybody figured out their apartments. So now where do these kids lie? And a lot of times the coaches are the ones who are still at the college and nearby. And so there's a lot coming at these college coaches. And again, I just want to give you guys perspective of what they're dealing with and what the implications then become with recruiting. So they're also making sure that their 2020s graduated and that they got all their paperwork into the eligibility centers and get cleared to be eligible. So, and then also trying to keep it connected with their teams, as many of you guys have been trying and probably been on Zoom all the time, trying to keep team chemistry going, as well as keep the kids updated with schedules and giving them workouts. And also, so, like you guys mentioned a little bit in terms of, making sure that they're fit to be ready to go to play whatever their seasons are going to look like. So, and, they're doing this across multiple different time zones, and some of them are doing it across the world too. So also the other flip side of it, I think it's important for you guys thinking through the budget side of it, is there's major cuts to all parts of their budgets, even Power 5 conferences. You would be surprised the conversations that are being had at some of the Power 5 conferences schools. And, we're all crossing our fingers that, as we all know, where football lies and how that helps finance a lot of schools. But, the idea of what the implications are going to be, even if they have to limit seating capacity or not even have any seating capacity in their football stadiums. And so, that implications also translate into recruiting travel budgets for coaches to attend events are going to be cut, and they're just going to be reduced in some regard across the board at a lot of schools. Now that also is going to have the implications for official visits budgets being reduced as well. Are they going to be cut completely? Probably not. But I think a lot of schools are having to make adjustments. And so that's important for you to know as a high school coach. And also the idea that their travel seasons and their actual seasons are being adjusted. Sometimes it's a reduction of the number of competitions. Sometimes it's shifting to the spring. And then also some of them are just shifting to regional travel as opposed to maybe they were doing across the country types of travel. And then some scholarship budgets have been cut already, or some of them are just trying to hold on and cross their fingers for 2020, but they are going to be making some adjustments for 2021 and 22. So it's important for you to know this as well as a coach. So, and then coaches are having a ton of pressure to fundraise as well. And the hard part for them is a lot of them use their summer camps as fundraisers, and most of them get the opportunity to do fundraisers, and to do camps as well. And so they're caught in a lot of situations. So what is the implications for that? If you can help your high school student athletes, especially those parents, know and understand a couple of things that these families really need to know. They should not be approaching college coaches asking for official visits. If a coach offers one, awesome. But the idea is, don't allow parents to have that expectation. Kind of nip that in the butt before it gets to the next level of them asking a college coach for an official visit, because it just kind of puts in a bad situation for that college coach. Even though they want that student athlete, they just may not have the budgets. And if there's not money, they're trapped, their hands are tied. It's not that they don't like that student athlete, but now the student athlete kind of takes it as, well, they're not interested in me. And it's like, no, actually, they just don't have the budget. If the money's not there, the money's not there. And so, the idea also is that these coaches are swamped right now. And so, a lot of people would say, oh, just try and catch them in the office, try and call them. Well, they don't want to be rude when they get a phone call on the other end and say, oh, we can't talk to you right now. But the idea is instead, especially for 2021s and 2022s, is setting up times to be able to speak with coaches and just shooting an email and saying, hey, coach, is this time or this time, an option that's going to be good for you guys. Also, when it comes to visits, a lot of kids will just say, hey, are you available on this one date at this one time? And college coaches feel really bad when they have to say, no, I'm not available at that time. So having them kind of say, hey, here's a couple of dates that may work for me to come visit you, and also knowing what the rules are. And I'm going to come to those in just a little bit. So it's important to know that. This next one is huge. I want you guys to help us out as from a college coach perspective to high school coaches. There's this old school mentality a lot of parents have. I think a lot of high school coaches and club coaches, travel coaches, you guys all know this, but parents don't always, they watch too many movies, I think, honestly, and saying what they see in the media, what it looks like in the recruiting process, is they have this expectation, oh, it doesn't matter what my grades are, well, the coach will just get me in. And that's a really old school mentality, and I think it happened many, many years ago. The reality is there's going to be so much more competition going on, and so make sure that you're trying to help your student athletes realize that their grades do matter, and they can't be blowing them off the grades their freshman and sophomore year, and that's just, everything's just going to be fine, But also encouraging kids to be responding quickly and making their job easier as college coaches. Give them everything that they need in emails. And we're going to cover what those look like here in just a second. So again, people, I keep getting this question left and right. Now that I do all this recruiting education programs, is everybody keeps saying is, how do I get so-and-so, whatever their name is, an opportunity to be seen now that whatever showcase or whatever has been canceled? So I want the response to be, you guys teach the student athletes how to market themselves within the rules. And I'm going to teach you guys what that looks like. We have a ton of resources on my website that are completely for free, and I'll have Eli put that into the chats as well, rlopezcoaching.com. You can find a ton of free resources. I'm going to walk through what those rules are. But the key here is control the controllables. Many of you guys say you're John Gordon's fans, and I'm honored to be a part of his speaking team. And the idea is control what we can do. And that's the idea is the student athletes can be reaching out, and you as coaches can be help supporting that process. So this document you see right here is very, very key. This is what the typical Division I opportunities of when you as a coach can contact, the college coaches can contact the student athletes, as opposed to the student athletes can always send emails. They just may be restricted in terms of what they can do. This is on my website. You can download completely for free. There have been some changes since May of 2019, a year ago. And then there's also some updated rules that have changed just for the past few months because of COVID. If you take a look, it is different for all the different sports. And what these are is rules of what the college coaches can do. So when you see correspondence, it's what the college coaches, what they can do out to the kids in men's basketball versus football versus baseball or other sports. You can see all those. If you look, the top and the bottom are different topics of what you can be covering. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but make sure that you know that this information is on my website completely for free. You can just download it. It'll give you there to be able to help you through that. And I'll walk through what currently is going on as well. Division I is currently in a dead period. What does that actually mean? This does not mean that you cannot email them or talk with them if allowed for your sport and graduation year. They can be on phone calls and emails if it's normally allowed based off that chart I just showed you. This just means they cannot have camps on their campus, and they cannot travel to an event that's going on. And this is right now currently in place until August 31st. Going to be honest with you, it's going to probably get extended. It's probably going to be extended for a few months. And I know nobody likes to hear that, but the conversations are trying to make sure that they keep their campuses safe and not exposing to other things going on. So right now, that is a dead period for Division I. Now, Division II has a current quiet period. The difference of a quiet period and a dead period is that they can have camps on campus and they can do on-campus visits for Division II. They still cannot travel off campus to an event to recruit. They but they can do emails and phone calls and such. So the difference is Division II can have camps on campus if their school is allowing it. So if a D2 says, no, you can't come to campus, it's because the school or their conference has decided they're not going to do it, okay? So it's not an NCAA rule at that point in time. It's a regional decision or a school decision. So Division I is having the dead period, meaning they can't have on-campus visits in terms of meeting with a coach and things like that. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go over and walk to the campus. If the campus is open, you can go walk it, you just can't meet with the coaches. And so make sure you understand that difference of Division II versus Division I and what college coaches can be doing and going out to do that. Now, I have also a same calendar for Division II and Division III, overall what the typical rules are of information. You can download again from my website completely for free. Now, when it comes to NAIs and junior colleges and other schools that you may be other affiliations, right now, most of them are not restricted in terms of an overall governing body. It could be just, again, they may restrict it in terms of the overall location of where they're at. So, some of the hot spots you're hearing about, they may not be allowing it to happen at a junior college or an NAI school, or Division III, but that right there is not a governing body decision. That was just the school or regional conference decision. So here's a couple of things that you can be helping your high school student athletes, and what can they be doing right now? Because a lot of them can't travel. A lot of them are not getting out to play. I'm excited to hear some of them are getting out to play, but it's not all across the board. One important thing is get them to get a PDF copy of their transcripts with their spring grades posted on it. It can be unofficial at this point. They should need a copy of it. Walk them through it, whatever it is at the high school. If you can help teach them what it is, and a lot of them think they know how to get to them. They don't know how to get to all of them. So walk them through that, as well encouraging them to start understanding what admissions and coaches are looking for in terms of potential recruits, in terms of the eligibility centers, as well for the NAI, as well as the NCAA for Division I, Division II. And then, like I mentioned, squash that way of thinking, the idea of expecting a coach is just going to get them in. There's just way too much competition going on. So make sure that they're not spending time and money with a recruiting service. College coaches hate them. 65 college coaches and athletic directors that I interviewed for my book was the idea of, they all kept telling me, tell people to stop paying for recruiting services. You don't need it. All college coaches want is they want an email sent to them with some video links, some information, a player profile, just a one-page player profile of their information. It doesn't have to have these recruiting services. You don't have to have this big fancy website. You don't have to have all those things. College coaches said they don't want emails being sent to them from a recruiting service. They want to have direct, personalized emails from the student athletes directly. And so help them understand what that looks like. Instead of spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on recruiting service, it's absolutely not necessary. Now, here's a couple of tips for you guys as well. If you're a coach, I think you're going to start to see, because a lot of times now the kids aren't going to be able to get out to showcases, is that you guys are going to get a lot of phone calls. It's going to happen, and they're really going to be asking, in terms of what it looks like of your interpretation of the kid. And to be very honest with you, they can typically judge a lot of their X's and O's and, technique and things like that off of video, if it's a decent video, and help your kids, get their videos if you guys have it within your schools and within your organizations. But I think the big thing is they're going to ask you about is they're trying to figure out who this kid is in terms of their leadership development. How do they deal with adversity? Is the kid getting into trouble, drinking, drugs, gangs, etc.? Are they a kid who just slacks all the time? What's their work ethic? They're going to try and find out all of those things as soon as possible. So I encourage you guys to make sure you're being 200% honest. Here is why. Now, I know you guys get a lot of pressure from the parents and from ADs and from the kids as well. And I think that's something that's hard, puts you guys in a lot of difficult situations. And looking and saying, here's the important thing is you need to make sure that you're being honest, telling coaches what's realistic, because if you don't, college coaches are not going to come back to you the next year. And you want to be a person that relies on. I can tell you right now on my cell phone, there's about 15 high school or club coaches that I have no problem calling up. They would tell me the exact truth, and I would call them up, 10 years from now as well, because I know exactly what they're going to tell me when it comes to recruiting a kid, and tell me the perspective. Here's where this kid gets lazy. Here's where this situation, because I want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly about a kid. I don't want surprises when a kid's already in my program. I want to know who they are before we actually recruit them. Now, the other next part is really important, if you guys can help in this process too, is thinking through, is checking their social media, because at some point, the college coaches will. 65 out of 65 college coaches and ADs told me at some point in time, we will check their social media. And even if they mark it private, it actually gives us a hint of thinking, well, ooh, it may or may not be a good situation. We want to know what, like I mentioned, about their commitment to academics, their work ethic, who's their character, what type of lifestyle they have. Are they looking for excellence every day, or do they take the easy road when they can? You know, that idea. Also, it's great that they have other college coaches interested, and you can tell us, that's okay, or you don't have to tell us, you know, when you're talking to a college coach. And, you know, most of the college student athletes or high school student athletes we're looking at, they should have other colleges looking at them. So any student athletes we're looking at are going to have multiple opportunities, but don't just lie to us, telling us, thinking that it'll increase their stock, and say, oh, this coach is really interested, they're offering a full ride, when they're really not. And so, you know, I think it's important to have those honest conversations with coaches. And then the important part is, I hear this happen a lot. Just because we called you does not mean we are offering the kid, does not mean we're giving them a scholarship, does not mean we're giving a roster spot. Do not go telling the parents that we're offering the kid just because we asked about it. Here's what I relate it to. Just because I ask who the cute guy girl name is who's across the room doesn't mean I ask them to prom. I'm just trying to find out more information about them. So again, being completely honest, tell them the straight up truth. You're going to get a lot of phone calls. I think that's going to happen even more than they typically do. And then do not just tell us that the kids can play for our program. You may not know our program, you may not have seen our program, and you know, that's the college coaches to decide. They're really trying to get to the heart of everything beyond the X's and O's. They really want to know, just don't oversell us to a kid. And you know, we know that you guys feel the pressure, but the idea is the more honest you can be during this time, the better off it's going to be. So what else can they be doing right now? They can be registered for the Eligibility Center. And for those of you who don't know, there is an Eligibility Center that is for the NCAA, Division I and Division II. They need to register. Also, there is a free version you can, or an undecided version that is free. Also mentions it as being Division III. They can always switch over to the paid version if they need to, but I recommend them starting with the free version. And then for the NCAA, if they end up going to play the route Division I, Division II, then they'll need to shift over and to actually pay some fees there. The NAI also has an eligibility center. You really can do that during your senior year, but coaches are going to want to know those eligibility center ID numbers as soon as you can. And then also having them send their transcripts, and if they have test scores, having them sent out to them too. And then also important for you guys to be helping them understand that they need to make sure that they are taking the right core courses. Do not expect, because they are on track to graduate, they're automatically eligible. I have a crazy horror story of this. I had a kid with a 30 ACT, 4.0, AP student, honors, everything. She was one of those kids that was really advanced, so she skipped over a math class. And guess what? I had to call her. We figured this all out. I think my compliance staff is calling us saying, we're talking about a different kid who had a 19 ACT. We're like, oh, is she gonna be eligible? We weren't sure. And we had this other kid who was a 30 ACTs who they're actually calling us about and saying, by the way, she's not eligible. We had to call her during the week of graduation at one point in time and say to her, I'm sorry, you have to take a summer class. My 4.0 kid had to take a summer class in order to be eligible because she had just not been conscientious of the core courses. So make sure you're helping with them with that. These are also the codes they can be putting in when they sign up for an ACT or an SAT, and putting that into the NCAA in order to get their scores sent there for the NCAA or the NAI. So it's important to have that information. And then also help these kids create a broken leg test. 20 to 30 colleges. Most kids start out with like 4 or 5 on their list. It's not enough, to be very honest with you, especially in this day and age. Help them kind of walk through this and start thinking about schools that really meet a broken leg test beyond their sport. What's the major? What's the location? How far away is it from home? Is it a big school? Is it a small school? Is it something that is really close to home? Or are they, you know, a plane flight away? And thinking through what that looks like. Is it a big city? Is it a small city? Who knows what that could look like for what they want? But kind of help them, you know, create an Excel spreadsheet, and then their communication that's going on with those coaches. And what the last thing the coach said, hey, maybe we're having an ID camp that's going to be happening at this time, you know, those types of things. But the other part is making sure that you have them contact coaches at every level. Do not just let kids put all of their eggs in the D1 basket. And unfortunately, we as college coaches refer to that as getting D1 on the brain. And they have to think beyond it, because there may be more money that's available at other levels. Honestly, a lot of times junior college and NAIs and Division IIs have a lot more scholarship money available than what it may be looking like for Division I. If you can also help them in sending video links and getting them information of them, what they have, whatever you guys may have, maybe if not, try and create some in your backyard or wherever, so your parks. And then also make sure that you're labeling their jersey number, cover, position, things like that. And then always include their email and graduation year. Ideally, those videos are 3 to 5 minutes. We have more information about this in my book as well. And always send it as a YouTube link. Never send it as an attached email. It just clogs their email inboxes. So we have tons of information about that, as well as this next part. Like I mentioned earlier about social media, making sure that the student athletes are actually being smart on social media. You'd be surprised how many of them get crossed off a list that they didn't even know they were on just because they weren't thinking first. And I go really in depth in this in my book as well, talking about the team first mentality and ideas of what college coaches are looking for, everything beyond the X's and O's. We have an entire chapter dedicated to this about what are the things college coaches are looking for and what are the triggers they look for in terms of on social media. So I'm just skimming over a little bit of this information here tonight for you guys, but then helping them through that process after they've got their social media set up, mentioning like the idea of making sure they're determining their priorities. And it's not just about athletics, because let's be honest, they all could get injured. It can happen. I do have a lot of information on my website. It talks about the strategies to email your college coach. Again, you can download this for free, rlopezcoaching.com. It's under my store, but it is for free. And you can find a ton of resources in there. But you can tell these kids to actually download this, as well as have their parents join our Facebook group too. So the other part is having them know what the updated situations are for test dates. So dates just opened up, I believe it was last night and up through today for ACT and SATs. And also encouraging them to also start thinking about, is it possible this next week of July and into August, and figuring out what it's going to look like for everything but Division I, and planning for later visits. Like I said, you can't be on campus yet, but they should be able to go on to most Division IIs and NAIs and junior college and Division III schools right now, if the local area allows it. Also encourage them to pick up a copy of Looking for a Full Ride. Like I mentioned, we interviewed 65 college coaches. We cover everything of what I'm talking about tonight. And just for you guys tonight, up through midnight tonight, we will do a free shipping coupon code. If you would like to pick up this book, it's at lookingforafullride.com. Coupon code is Alliance. You'll get to the end, and when you're about to purchase, you guys can use Alliance and you'll get a free shipping. It'll only go till midnight tonight. Again, lookingforafullride.com. To pick that up, I encourage you to take a look at that as well. And then also for some of you guys, if you are interested in having me speak, we do 90-minute webinars. We had about 25 minutes here today, so I'm kind of rushing through all this, and I want to have some time for questions as well. But if you guys your organization were to buy 25 books, I will do a free 90-minute webinar. This is an offer I do not normally do. This is an offer I'm doing just because I'm calling it the COVID-19 craziness offer. And we want to just be able to help that out. I'm only doing that for 4 schools. So if you are interested in doing that, send me an email, info@lookingforafullride.com, and I'll speak with you either tomorrow or the next day, and we'll get some things set up and what it looks like for your school. And, I know some of the budget cycles are turning over and things like that as well, but we'll get some things scheduled with you guys. Again, I'll only offer that to 4 schools, schools or travel clubs, whatever you may be coaching. Again, just shoot me an email. If you buy 25 books, we'll give you guys a free 90-minute webinar, and you guys can put up to about 150, maybe 175 people on the webinar. So you can have tons and tons of families as well as coaches and such too. You guys can feel free to reach out to me, info@lookingforafullride.com. And also want to give you guys information. I have over 40 free blogs on my website of information about the college recruiting process, put together all kinds of different information for student athletes, and definitely feel free to check some of those out. And then, like I mentioned, join our Facebook group. This is one's completely for free. We have over 10,000 people that are in there, and we share information every single day talking through that. So I want to be able to give you guys time for questions, but I also want to make sure everybody's got my email address right there. And I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to throw it out to you guys in questions. And Eli, I'll send it over to you. You may be muted. Let me unmute you. There you go. Awesome. All right.
Awesome.
If there's any questions you guys have, feel free to throw it out there and into the chat, either on Facebook Live or Zoom, and we'll try and cover as many of them as we can.
Awesome. Renee, thank you so much. Incredible amount of resources. And I think for coaches, I know there's coaches ranging at all levels. We're talking a lot about the college side of things now, but looking at yourself as a coach that's looking out for players' longevity in their career. 1, now you're a coach that is informed, you're plugged in. And 2, a lot of this stuff does apply even if you're talking about club level, high school level, and all that stuff. So just so many valuable pieces. I put a couple of links in the chat, guys, and I already have a bunch of questions from you. So Renee, I will just field a couple of these that we got coming in. And we already have multiple people asking a question on the similar theme, which is multi-sport athletes. So, thinking about multi-sport athletes, first off, when is the right time? If someone's a competitive, solid player that's looking to play in college, when is the right time for them to really pick a sport, and what should they be doing with their other sports from a perspective of a college coach?
Okay, I think there's two sides to this. First of all, if you want to play two sports in college, there's a different conversation we're going to have versus I want to play one sport, but I'm currently a multi-sport athlete. I'm going to cover the first topic. If you want to play two sports in college, I always encourage the idea of you start with your best, most talented sports, contact coaches there early on, probably sophomore year going into junior year, or maybe a little bit earlier if you're trying to play at some higher levels, okay? But a lot of smaller schools are going to look for those options. Not most bigger schools are looking for that option, because as a college coach, if you do well in your other sport and you tear your ACL, you can't play for my sport, but I invested scholarship money into you. And as a college coach, my job relies on you helping to contribute to my team and me winning. And so it's not beneficial for most college coaches to really want to go into the two sport idea. Now that changed a little bit at the NAI level and D3, D2, again, it depends on junior college levels. That may be something they're balancing out scholarship offers in order for you to afford to go to schools. But I think if you're going to play two sports, really encourage you to start out with one sport, conversations with the coaches early on. Once you get things rolling with that coach, say, coach, what would you think about me also playing this sport? Have that conversation. Don't send out emails to both sports and then think it's, kind of throwing noodles at the wall and hoping it sticks. Instead, go through the process, because you don't want the baseball coach and the basketball coach to figure out that you were sending emails to both of them, and then they're both recruiting you, and then they both want you, and now they're not really happy about the process. So start out with the one that's your better sport, and then go from there. If you're trying to play two sports. All right, let's go to the other shift to the other side. If you are a multi-sport athlete and you are wanting to play one sport and you're trying to decide what makes sense, okay? First of all, I think the idea of looking at, especially in some sports, when you're looking at, sports like football, things like that, where you're looking at size and what that could be and the potential of what that could be. I think, I'm 5'2", my mom's 5'2", and my dad's 5'5". The likelihood that I was going to be 6 foot is very slim. Okay. I'm just going to be honest with you. So thinking through it and thinking what makes sense physically as well as technically, where are they? Are they the leader in terms of their sport? And but the other part of it is you can have a huge passion and willing to get better and focus on a sport and getting better every single day. Maybe you join the sport later on and you can see where are they growing the most in terms of their abilities, where's their work ethic the best, and then also looking at the size demands as well. And I think reaching out to coaches that way and saying, hey, when do you specialize? I'm not going to be the person who says you got to specialize by this date. Honestly, I have many student athletes who played for me, who played 4 years of another sport before they played for me. And just obviously focusing with me with one sport. But I did also have two sport athletes that also played for me at the college level. It wasn't easy, and they have to be, if they're going to play two sports in college, they have to be a very, very good student who's also very independent in terms of their learning, and then not having to be very dependent on what's going on, and and a lot of time with teachers. They need to be someone who's going to be very self-disciplined in what they're doing. So the other part of it is, if they're prone to injury, I wouldn't go down that route. If you're, they've had 2 ACLs, probably not the idea of trying to go through 2 sports. So hopefully that kind of covers kind of those areas. So now some people have asked me privately, is it legal for college coaches to call me to ask a player to call them? It depends on the level. It depends on the sport. I'm going to encourage you to download what we have on our website, because the answer to that varies by sport and graduation year and also the level. So the person who's asking me that privately, definitely download those 2 things and it will show it in there. If you can't find it on those documents, feel free to shoot me an email and I will make sure I know the sport in which you're talking through, as well as the graduation year and the levels of college. So we won't get into that too. So, all right. Looks like I need to, oh, yep. Eli muted himself here. We got there. Okay.
Sorry. I'm not used to having to handle the unmute, but we got another question here from Sarah. And so she's asking, how can youth coaches, I think she runs a travel program, that aren't necessarily in official recruiting roles, what advice are you giving to them to build, their program and use recruiting tactics and strategies to really, foster what they're looking to do long-term with their club?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is education. There's a lot of people who are calling these kids up saying you have to buy into these recruiting services. And that's like, honestly, one of the number one things that the college coaches all told me when I did these interviews. And I personally always thought, I'm like, well, there's no point. What it shows kind of to the coaches is that you're lazy and you're paying somebody else to do what you should be doing instead. So I think the idea is educating your families, because not letting them buy into the recruiting services and spending thousands of dollars. I just heard somebody spent $5,000 on a recruiting service. I'm like, that is crazy to me. It's not necessary. So I think education, definitely get all of your parents into my Facebook group. It's for free, so it's there. But also teaching kids early on. I encourage you to be having education sessions with them as 8th graders and freshmen, maybe going into their sophomore year, of what they should be thinking about in colleges. So let's just think of it this way. If they don't play their sport in college, what's the worst that happens in them researching colleges? They end up going to a college and not playing the sport. So I think if we can talk with them about the ideas of what types of things are important, get them to go and visit some campuses. Let's say you have a tournament in, we were talking about Charleston. Let's say you're going to be in Charleston for a tournament. Then just do a little drive-by and go see Charleston Southern, and the Citadel's not too far from there too. And maybe you swing by a couple other schools that are nearby there. Just let them do a tour and say, ooh, and they may say, oh my gosh, I don't want to go to school here because of this, or I like this school because of this. And starting those kind of conversations, in doing that, you guys can just do a walking tour. You don't even need to have coaches involved, just to give them a perspective. You can do that when you're traveling. And especially if you're not, especially with the high school, it's a little bit easier to do this when, travel clubs, things like that, youth programs, you may be able to do some of that. Now, if, I don't really encourage the recruiting talks to be happening when they're 6th, 7th, 8th graders. I think at the end of 8th grade, going into their freshman year, I think is really key to start having some of those conversations, educating parents, not just the kids, but make sure the parents are on there. But again, like I mentioned, we are offering that one offer out because I feel like so many families are needing this help right now. If you buy 25 bucks, I'm doing a webinar completely for free for 90 minutes. So
Awesome.
Give you a shout out if you guys want to do that for sure. So
very cool. Hey, so we've got another question here. How do you see the fallout of what's happening right now, where kids have missed seasons? Some of them are in kind of pure developmental stages, and they might be, might get 2 winter seasons in a row and then no spring season. How do you see coaches trying to manage that from a lens of developing athletes?
Well, I think it's definitely going to be some issues at the college level. I'm sure it's going to be issues for you guys at the high school level. I think we're going to see, I hate to say this, having had a knee surgery myself and an ankle surgery myself, but I predict we're going to see a lot more injuries because we're relying on student athletes to be self-disciplined and do things at home during this whole entire time, where they may not have had equipment, things like that, and they may not have even had availability to get out and do things, and so I think we're going to see a lot of that. Now, what can I do? That's a Debbie Downer side of it, but I think the positive side of it is those kids who were not recruited early on as 2021s. It kind of became an even playing field come February, March, when everything started to happen. I know kids that were not even on radars of college coaches, and I think what we'll see is some of those kids are going to have opportunities if they're proactive the next 2 months. If they sit back the next 2 months and don't do anything, they're not going to probably have opportunities. And college coaches are going to have, they may be having some ID camps and things like that. And so I think there's going to be some things going on that happens. Now, the implications for spring sports is going to be there for sure. There are going to be student athletes that stick around for that 5th year. Now, not all of them are going to. They were a month and a half or 2 months away from graduating. A lot of them had jobs lined up, so they're not all going to do it. And they are not. The NCAA allowed them to return. The NCAA did not say that the schools had to keep them at the same scholarship level. So it's important to know that they may be told you have an extra year of eligibility, but we don't have money for you, because they had already offered the money out to the 2020s, 21s, things like that, and how their money had been divided across there. So there are definitely going to be some implications. It's a great question, in terms of development, what's going to be happening. We hope that student athletes are self-disciplined, and we all want them to be that way. We all as coaches, right? And so, it matters of what implications we're having with student athletes when they weren't around their coaches. And you guys already, I think a coach, Brian Mitchell, said it earlier, is you could tell those kids who would not be doing anything. And unfortunately, it's obvious. And college coaches are going to be looking for those kids who were doing things and who are dedicating into self-discipline for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what we've been telling our athletes. Just it's the biggest opportunity to create a shift in terms of where you are in your competition level. And one more question here, just in terms of, we got a lot of collegiate athletes that are coming back that were supposed to graduate, and Matt wrote this in. What are you seeing in the landscape of junior college, juniors for hockey or whatever sport it may be in the traditional path of high school, whatever the next step is in college? Is there an increase in kids that are going to be going to junior colleges? What does that path look like to you?
I think a lot of them are, because some people are thinking, well, I'll just take a gap year, quote unquote, and thinking that way. I think it's very important to be very conscientious that just because they graduate from high school and then that next year they go to junior college and they go to classes and they complete classes and they do okay GPA wise, that doesn't mean they're going to automatically be eligible to transfer to a four-year school that next year. Okay, it's important to make sure that they do the right things. Now, if they were to take a gap year and they are not playing, there's a lot of things you have to worry about from the NCAA and eligibility as well. With way too many things to go into tonight. Again, shoot me an email. I'll be glad to walk through some of those processes with you guys as coaches. We want to make sure kids are being educated on the process. But I think also what we'll see is a lot of kids are going to go to the junior college, because if you're going to do online classes to a school that's all the way across the country, why not do the junior college instead? And it'd be much cheaper. I think that's going to happen. Now, that being said, what are those schools going to honor the next year? Because then they're not a part of the 2020 class. Are they part of the 2021 class? And what is that going to look like? So yeah, I think there's definitely going to be, I have 3 emails in my inbox right now talking about, I was going to go 4-year, but now I'm thinking about junior college. And I'm like, okay, let's have this conversation of what that's going to look like. And so I do some individual consulting with families as well, walk them through the process. And many of them have had been thrown through a loop because their sport may not be happening this year at all. So they're trying to make some adjustments and thinking through what will make sense. So it's really important to make sure if they do go the junior college route, please make sure you as a coach know what to tell them, advise them, what in terms of eligibility, so we don't trigger seasons of eligibility, as well as making sure that once they transfer, they're still going to have their 4 years to be able to play if they're not playing at that school, versus if they do play at that school, what's going to look like to make sure they still have their 3 years left, or if they stay there for 2 years in order to transfer. I think a lot of kids get caught up in the transfer process and they just don't know what they're getting themselves into. They don't even know what they don't know, in making sure that we get them straight in terms of being eligible. And so you will have 4.0 kids who are not eligible from, even they went from a junior college as a 4.0 to transfer into a 4-year, and they're not eligible just because of how the process works. So we want to make sure we're doing the right things for sure.
Yeah. So last question as we wrap up here, and I'm going to reshare some of these links again. Just thank you for all the content and availability that you're providing to everyone here. And any insights that you've learned from watching and being around some of the best recruiters as coaches. So I'm thinking, coaches that run a private school team or run a club and they're recruiting for their own team. Anything insight wise that you could share with those coaches to take away that they can implement their own recruiting strategies?
I think that's huge. That's awesome. I appreciate that question for sure. I have been around some of the best programs and coaches, and it's so great. I was able to spend 2 years at the University of Florida as a grad assistant, and I'd been a high school coach and a club coach as well for about 3-4 years by that time. And now as a grad assistant, and I had no problem picking up cones. I was really good at it, just so I could be around the program. And having been in a situation like that, and being in the SEC and being able to be around it obviously developed me as a coach for sure. And being around some of the best of the elite athletes and national team players, there was nothing greater than watching how college coaches spoke the exact same to the national team player, as well as how they spoke to a player who maybe get off the bench for us. And I think that's a really huge lesson that I learned, is just because they're more talented athletes, that they doesn't mean that they're more valuable in terms of the team dynamics. And I learned that really early on as a coach. And I think it's something that I really took with me. And so I think it's, something I encourage. Are we paying as much attention to the kid who's just a role player for us, and versus the kid that is, a kid who is going to change our program, as we all say, and making sure that we develop those relationships. And, if you've read John Gordon, anything like that, you'll know Power of Positive Leadership. I highly encourage you to pick up that book as well, Power of Positive Team. And he talks about a lot of those things about how our dynamics with our teams are. And so when it comes down to it from a recruiting standpoint, is coaches want to know character. They want to know who that kid is. They want to know that kid in terms of what's they're getting 1% better every day. We call it Kaizen. For those of you who have never heard that term, it's a Japanese term of continuous improvement. And the idea is we want to know how that kid strives to get better and better each day, because there's hundreds of kids that are just equally as talented as they are across the country or across the world. The idea is they're looking for that elite level athlete who is mentally pushing themselves, they're developing themselves as a leader, as well as they're looking to make sure that they increase their knowledge of the sport and growing to get better every day. And I think when you look at that situation, whether you're the All-American national team player or a kid who's just going to come off the bench for us, and looking and saying, as a coach, we're going to treat that process the same. We're going to look at your social media. We're going to get to know who you are. We want to know the good, bad, and the ugly about you. And we want to make sure we know who we're bringing to our program, because this is our livelihoods as coaches. And it's not just, oh, well, we do this on the side. It is our livelihood. And if student athletes do stupid things, it is this school's student athlete did stupid things that's on the headlines for the news. And so you can help them realize that, we know at the high school level, but it's a whole different level when you get to the college level for sure.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Renee, thank you so much for joining us again, and just incredible stuff. We're going to definitely share this video out once we get the Zoom recording. It's in the Facebook Live for those of you guys joining us there. And I know there's quite a few of you that have just replied back, with conflicts in terms of vacation and games and events and stuff like that. So we know a lot of you guys are going to be watching that replay. But any of the questions that you have that you didn't get answered, I know there were a few we couldn't get to here tonight, definitely feel free to email Renee, and she put the email address and website in there as well. And we'll be sharing that again in the Facebook group for those of you guys who are joining there. So just want to say thanks again for joining us, Renee, to everyone else who joined the call. Pudge, I think you, it looks like you're still muted here, but we will wrap it up here and just say, again, have a great week. We'll be back in a couple weeks after this. And Renee, any last words before we sign off?
Well, thanks so much, guys, for having me. I appreciate being a part of this. And if there's anything I can do to help all of you guys as coaches, please feel free to reach out, and I will help. If I don't know the answer, I will find out the answer for you. I promise you that.
Dedication and commitment. Love it. Awesome. Well, we'll see you guys in a couple weeks and talk soon. Stay tuned in the Facebook group for awesome conversations and updates coming up for the next call. Thanks, everyone.